Welcome CSC103 to our module on digital security. And I believe this is from module 7 out of our Cengage book, so this kind of follows that somewhat. There's 33 slides here, so I'm going to try to go through these as quickly as possible just to guide you a little bit. I'm not going to explain everything on it if you want to look up more. There's a lot of information about digital security, about viruses, about malware, all of this kind of stuff. And I'm not going to explain everything, but I'm just going to guide you through a little bit. So let's get started. So again, it's digital security. This is module 7 in the Cengage book. We'll first talk about encryption and decryption. And again, even if you think of the most simplest way of encryption, you're telling somebody a secret. What do? You cover up your mouth, you whisper, you make sure that people can't see the information. You see, if you watch football games, they're always putting their playbook or their play card over their face while they're giving information. If you watch sports, they're always making signals so that people can't understand if someone's going to steal or what play they're going to run. So there's always encryption in some way where it's basically scrambling the information so other people can't intercept it. And you don't want to pick up the original information. You don't want to know that they're going to steal. You don't want to know that they're throwing a fastball. You don't want to know that you're saying something about somebody, whatever it is, but you're encrypting it in some way. You're giving people signals, or you're pointing to something. You're giving signals without saying it out loud. So that's what encryption is, and we use it in digital information a lot. Plain text is the original information, the original message that you don't want people to know necessarily, so you use encryption to kind of cover it up. Here's a couple terms here. Ciphertext, that's the encrypted message. That's the one that they can understand. So if you're making hand signals to somebody, if you're a catcher in baseball and you're giving people signals and you're giving some are the right signals, some are the wrong signals, you're putting things in there to kind of confuse people, that's basically ciphertext. It's you're showing people the message that isn't really the right message. If you ever open up an encrypted file, what does it look like? It's a bunch of text and garbled stuff. You don't even know what it is. You can't even figure it out. You could try to look through it and look for a password or something in it, but it's really hard to do. And decryption is the way of removing that to actually see the original message to it. And what you need is some kind of key. It could be a word, a phrase, a password, or something to decrypt that. And here's an example of something that you might have seen. Crypto quotes. Maybe you haven't, but these used to be in the newspapers all the time. And it basically was kind of a simple game where you had to figure out the code. There was some quote there, and it was by somebody. At the bottom, there was usually a name, and you had to figure it out. And basically what happens is one letter represents a different letter, and you have to kind of go through the patterns, and you make your own key. That's what you end up doing. So when you look at this, there's a cryptographic algorithm, and that's basically the system that made one letter stand for another letter. And it's obviously different each time, or otherwise you'd figure it out one time, you'd actually have the key, but there's a different key each time. So they use some kind of algorithm to make one letter represent a different letter. So that's the cryptographic algorithm, and then it's your job to actually make the key. So you come up with the key, you figure out what the A is, maybe you know what the A is, and then you figure out some letters, and then by some of those other letters, then you could guess other letters. And by our language, we know some words are actually one letter, some words are actually two letters, the most common kind of ones. That would be in a quote or something like that, or even letters that might be in a name. So that's kind of an example. Another example, if you ever watched Turn, I watched it on Netflix. It was about Washington spies. And that was a series that dealt with a lot of encryption and decryption. When the spies were sending information, they would always have somebody else have the key so that if you ever caught the spy, you didn't have the information. There was always more people involved. You couldn't just nail the spy ring with one person. There was multiple people involved to add more security. Now, what can be encrypted? Data sent over wired and Wi-Fi networks, the packets of information that you send over Wi-Fi, that you send when you're on the internet, credit card info, bank account information, your personal information, which is important, like social security numbers and things like that, and your passwords and your usernames, as well as storage volumes. Your hard drive can be encrypted. Individual files can be encrypted. If you have a file that has very personal information that you don't want to share, you might want to encrypt that. So if anybody ever steals your computer or gets a hold of it, maybe you have a file called passwords, where you have so many passwords, you put them in a file. Well, first of all, I would recommend not naming your file passwords, but if you did, encrypt that file so someone would need a password to get into that file if they ever took your computer. User authentication, process of verifying your identity. When you go into sites, you may have a username, you may use your email, anything like that. You log into your Wi-Fi network, use passwords, use PINs, fingerprint scans, facial recognition. You even deal with two-factor authentication. I know sometimes it's a pain because it's like, oh, I don't have my phone right with me and it just sent me a code, but that's used for extra security, especially for things like banking and paying bills and stuff like that. They'll send a code just to make sure it's you. So it's not just somebody who got on your computer. They also have to have your phone, and you have to be able to get into your phone to get the code. So it just provides a higher level of security. Hacking passwords, how do they do it? Brute force attack, dictionary attack, two kinds of things. One uses software that runs for hours and hours trying to crack the code. Another is a dictionary attack where hackers try to guess the password by going through the letters and looking for common combinations and things like that, even to see if you replaced an and sign with an A and S's with dollar signs. It goes through all that kind of stuff. All the things that you think are really tricky, they'll try to do that with a dictionary attack and a brute force attack. Password protection, what can you do about it? Well, be smart and secure about your passwords. Use more secure passwords that have upper and lower case, that have symbols, that have all kinds of things. Don't use passwords that are common to you, that people could look up on social media and know that it's your birthday and know who your partner is and who your kids are and who your dogs are and all that kind of stuff. And they could find it out pretty quickly and, just by doing a lot of guessing. People will spend hours and days guessing things. So even though it may take they're not going to guess that for a little while, if you have a 4-number PIN, it doesn't take that long to kind of figure out something if you had to. Use different passwords for different sites. Don't use the same password for your banking site that you use to go on, CodePen or Gravit or something like that, or your Google account. Make sure you have different passwords for different sites, and make sure the ones for your banking sites and more secure sites are more secure. And change them often. Don't keep them the same forever. Change them often. The one thing that gets people into trouble is they've had that same password for years. Make sure that you're updating your passwords as well. I know some sites make you do that, and it's kind of a pain. Even on our Warren email and our Warren accounts at school, they make you do that, but it's just for security. Don't use these passwords. Here's just a slide here with most popular passwords. You might think this is a joke, but it's not. People use these passwords. So if your password is in here, don't use it. Malware, you might have heard of malware, and malware is one of those things where you don't really have to worry about it, but once you think you might have it, you probably do. So you might have to get something like Malwarebytes, which is a free kind of application that you can get rid of malware even if you don't use the premium version, but they can infect your registry, your system files. You usually know things will start to get worse and worse on your computer. I haven't had this on a Mac. Actually, I had one thing on a Mac, but primarily it's been something on Windows that I've had to deal with, and it eventually can get so bad that they can, it could be ransomware. They could use extortion where they could hold your computer ransom for money, but malware is usually something that is kind of infecting your system registry, and that can cause you a lot of problems. And again, all this kind of stuff, and I'll say this a couple times throughout this presentation, back up your stuff, because if something goes wrong, if you have to just wipe your hard drive and reinstall your operating system, you have your files. Don't leave your files unbacked up for months and years and stuff, so that if somebody gets your stuff, there's nothing you can do. Make sure you back up your stuff. So if you have to wipe out your computer, you still have all your files that you need. Here are viruses. Some of these are more serious, some are less serious, but it's basically a type of malware. It's a computer program that attaches itself and can spread and replicate, and it usually requires some kind of human interaction. It requires you to do something. It won't just sit there quietly. Usually you have to do something to make it spread. But the best thing you can do is get antivirus software and keep it up to date. Spreading viruses, there's different ways to do this. One's called code injection, where they put executable files, meaning exe files can actually make things happen. Side loading, you download a kind of an unofficial app that is doing things that you weren't expecting to do, or it even came along with something when you're downloading stuff. I've seen this happen on Windows where I downloaded something and then I see something else downloading and I was like, wait, that's not it. That's not what I was downloading, and there's something else downloading at the same time. So you just got to be really careful about what you're doing, especially when you're going to sites and messing around with free stuff. You're looking for anything. It could be a free sound, a free this, a free that. Whenever you get to those kind of sites, and even if you search them out, the ones on the top of the list are usually the ones to avoid. And again, how to catch a virus, go into free sites. Anything where you're looking to get something for free usually isn't good. You're going to see these fake plugins come up saying you need a Flash plugin. Now, nowadays with Chrome and Firefox, Flash is built in and it's updated automatically. You usually don't have to go and download it again. You can either turn it on or turn it off as you need. Usually it's turned off, but you can activate it as you need if you need to use Flash, but rarely do you have to go download Flash again. So just be careful of that. Email attachments, pop-ups, all that kind of stuff. Just be careful about that stuff. Anything that doesn't look right or feel right, just stay away from it. Rootkit viruses, it's code that kind of hides the existence of processes and privileges, meaning it lets kind of hackers get in there as an administrator. It'll hide security privileges that'll prevent other people from getting in, and that's actually the way they get in. So it gives them administrator access. So that's another type of virus that'll get in there. And if you wonder, how did that happen? How did they get access to that? That's how it happens. So there's a lot of malicious stuff that can get to your computer. Worms, look at that. Look at how scary they look. But it's a program that can replicate without any human interaction. So I remember back in the 90s, there was Mac worms that were spread on the zip disks. And everybody was getting them from just transferring disks. And eventually there was software that you could just run, an antivirus software that got rid of it. But it was a big thing for a while. Now you'll see mass mailing worms, internet worms, file sharing worms, and you could read more about that. But these are older ones. I don't know if these are still prominent, but I remember there was macro viruses that used to come with like Excel files and Word files with Microsoft Office, because macros were these scripts that would actually make things run faster. So you could record a script of running a bunch of operations at one time, and it would actually help workflow. It was an efficient way of workflow. It's like Actions in Photoshop, where you could actually record a number of steps, but people used to send disks along, and they used to put malicious stuff inside these scripts, and they used to give people viruses. I don't know if that really happens anymore, although there's still JavaScript injection that people can actually get viruses through JavaScripts that'll run through browser URLs and things like that. So there's lots of ways. There's 33 slides here. That's a huge chapter. It's just people trying to do bad things to other people. You know, it's a shame that this has to be our longest chapter in the book. Trojan horses. This is, if you know anything about history, it's where they kind of give a gift and it looks like a good thing, but it's really not. So if you ever have software that seems like it's going to be something, oh, it came for free, download it for free, you're like, wow, why is that there in my applications folder? And you don't know what it is, but it seems like something that's going to be useful, but it's probably not. And they install backdoor programs, rootkits, all that kind of nasty stuff. It can turn your computer into a zombie, meaning it can take control of your computer. But again, a Trojan horse is something that appears to be useful, but is really not. Again, here's some virus symptoms. And this could be related to malware and stuff like that too. You see strange icons. Your icons and all your applications have changed. They're different. You have your homepage changes on your websites. That happens a lot with adware as well. You have weird pop-ups and sounds. Files don't open like they used to. Programs don't launch at all. Your computer is shutting down and starting up on its own. Stuff like that is usually, time to start doing some research. When you do your research, don't look at the first search option that comes up in your research, because sometimes people scam people by putting things in the top of the search of certain symptoms, and then it actually gets worse. So you really got to dig through some things and be somewhat of a detective as far as figuring things out, and look for sites that are reputable, not just the first thing that pops up when you do a search and it says, oh, I have strange icons appearing, and you look at the very first search item. I mean, that could be something that's also preying on you, believe it or not. So just watch out for things like that. Make sure you do your updates, but we'll talk more about protecting yourself. First of all, antivirus software, especially on Windows. I haven't had to use antivirus software on a Mac at all, ever. I think I used a malware software once on a Mac, and that wasn't even on my computer. And there's a lot of free options. Avira, AVG, Avast, Kaspersky, Malwarebytes you could use just on a one-time basis if you need to just run a malware scan. You don't always need McAfee and Norton. I know those come installed with Windows sometimes. I always felt they caused more problems than they were worth. I felt they were a little just intrusive as far as what you're doing. But run a scan once a week. Keep it updated. If you don't keep them updated, they're not worth having. You have to make sure you have auto update on, or they update, because there's always new viruses coming out. So just because you have it on there doesn't mean it's doing anything. And this is what they do. They detect. They look for a signature, something that doesn't seem right. They stop execution. They quarantine it in a private area. And then basically it looks for these same kind of virus signatures again to keep it away. So that's basically how it works. Spyware, you've heard of this. It's malware that sits on your computer and spies on you and watches what you're doing. So either way, that doesn't sound like a good thing. Adware, this is more common. It monitors your browsing activity. Sometimes it's not really totally malicious, but you'll get more targeted ads. It's just another invasion of your privacy. And it can change your home pages, your search engines, things like that. Keyloggers, this is used by hackers to gather information about your browsing habits, your keystrokes. They could get passwords. Man in the middle will monitor communications, so it's just another form of spying. Phishing and spear phishing, you've probably dealt with this. I've dealt with this at school, where you get an email and it seems like it's from the IT support. You get emails from companies, all kinds of things, and they seem real. And sometimes right away, you almost want to click on it. My wife got an email from Netflix saying that they were going to close our Netflix account. And it was like, oh, no, not Netflix. And unless we updated our credit card information or something like that. And then I was finally like, wait a minute. Her email was not on the account. It was under my email. So why would she get an email? And right away, there's a red flag. So look for red flags of things that don't seem right. If you get an email that says, we need your password information, we need your credit card, we need this, really look at it. Look at the email. Look at the email it came to, not just the one that says it's from, support at something. Make sure you really look at the email and hover over. And a lot of times it's somebody's Gmail account. It's something like that. We get them at schools, supposedly from the president and from IT, all kinds of things. But some of them can look really real. So always be kind of a detective and go through these things. When anyone's asking you to update your password, to change your password, to send information, to send credit card information, always really look at this a number of times, just like you would when you get a phone call, and they say it's the IRS or it's Apple and you need to do this and you've been hacked and all that. You're like, wait a minute. Why would they call our home phone number? I don't even have that on anything. Be the same way online. Make sure you check everything and call the company, email the company before you do anything and say, hey, is this real? Why is this happening? And that's how they do that. They scare you right away. You think your account's going to get locked up and you do something real quick without even thinking about it. And that's how they do it. That's why they call it phishing, because they're just kind of looking to see how many they catch. They throw this net out and, maybe they send out 1 million emails like this. And if they catch a couple people, they could scam a couple people. Some of these other things they mentioned in the chapter are things that will affect big companies, zero-day attacks. They prey on vulnerabilities that haven't even been discovered yet. Hackers use these. So these aren't things that are coming after your local computers, but they happen to bigger companies. Denial of service attacks, you've probably encountered these when Amazon is down, Google's down, bank accounts are down, where you have hackers going after big companies and flooding their websites and flooding requests, or their site gets shut down. And, usually these are some kinds of hackers, usually to either create chaos or send some kind of message. And this is also the kind of stuff you see if you watch those FBI shows and police shows and things like that, where there's a robot network taking over the entire system and there's nothing they can do and all that kind of stuff. But it's not usually the kind of thing that comes after, your individual computer at your home. Ransomware, sometimes they'll prey on people who don't back up their information. You have all your files, all your pictures, everything, and then suddenly your computer gets taken over and they're asking you to pay for a decryption key. Sometimes they're asking for a gift card. You pay them in a gift card. If there's anything like that where they're looking for a gift card, obviously something's not right. And sometimes people do this because they get desperate. They don't want to lose all their files, all their information. They have photographs for years on there that they never backed up, and they'll just pay it just figure, well, I just have to pay it to get my stuff back. But the only thing you could do is make sure you back up your information so you're not held hostage because of your files. Be like, hey, fine, I have everything backed up. I'm going to just wipe out my hard drive, wipe out my operating system, reinstall everything. It's not fun to do that, but it's better than paying someone to give you access to your own computer. Other kind of viruses and stuff, email viruses that use your address book. You've seen stuff on Facebook where Facebook accounts get hacked and they're sending out messages to people. And not only is it embarrassing, but it can affect your security. It can affect how people view you, even professionally, if it's something like a LinkedIn thing or anything like that. And ransomware I mentioned here too, where your computer can be unusable. But some of these things, there's not a lot you can do. You just have to recognize it quickly. If something doesn't seem right, investigate it a little bit further. Here's another thing. Cookies. Cookies are terrible. Actually, they're not. I put this on here because some people think cookies are something that are, I have to turn off cookies. It keeps my computer from being secure. Cookies are something that are used on websites. So it's a text file that gets put on your computer so you can go back to that website and it makes it more usable. It'll remember things. It'll remember your browsing history for that site. It'll remember your username so you could go back in again and stuff like that. They're not malicious. It's actually meant to help you. Now, if you go to sites that are not good sites, that are malicious sites, yes, they could hurt you, but generally they're meant to help you. You have to turn them on actually to use things like Amazon or buying sites and, secure sites. It's just that it's meant to help you. So don't be afraid of cookies. You need them to make your web browsing experience better. Hackers. All you have to know, if you see a guy like that, if you go somewhere and you see a guy with a white mask on and a black hoodie, that is a hacker. That's what they look like. So if you're wondering what a hacker looks like, that's what they look like. Obviously, hackers can be anybody and they're invisible because you don't know who they are. but they mention white hat hackers. There's good hackers who aren't bothering with you. They're just trying to expose weaknesses. Black hat hackers, they're the ones creating denial of service. They're the ones creating chaos, stealing passwords, stealing social security numbers, selling social security numbers, all that kind of stuff, stealing identities. Black hat hackers will do. And gray hat may just kind of toe the line. I don't really know too many hackers, but if I see a guy that looks like that, I'll know. All right, some of the tools they use, keylogger. If you're in a lot of public places, that's where you got to be careful. If you're in a lot of public Wi-Fi places, where you don't know who's around you, that's where you got to worry about it. Keyloggers and things like that. Not that you can't be vulnerable anywhere, but certainly in public places with laptops and things like that, you can be more vulnerable. Just be careful. If you're in a public place, don't do your banking or anything like that in a public place. If you're at the car dealer and you're getting an oil change somewhere and you're using their public Wi-Fi, don't do your banking there. Don't pay your bills while you're there. Do something else. Protecting yourself. Now, some things you already have built in. You have firewalls built in probably to your routers, and you have a password on your Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. Your operating system, you keep it up to date. You do your security updates. They have firewalls built in. Like I said, your routers probably have firewalls built in. There's not a whole lot you have to do unless you're, running some kind of business out of your home where you're dealing with credit cards and security. Be smart about what sites you visit. If you visit questionable sites, clear your history and cache. Don't take cookies. If you're going to bad places, bad things are going to happen. So just be careful as far as that goes. Use a different browser or something. If you're going to go to bad sites, use a different browser. Clear your history, clear your cookies. Don't do it on your regular Google account or anything like that. Use a search engine that doesn't track you, like DuckDuckGo. The biggest thing of all these slides that we have here is back up your data. If you back up your stuff, if you have stuff backed up to the cloud, you have them on an external hard drive, you have them on flash drives, things like that. So if something happens to your computer, someone takes control of it, even if your hard drive crashes, whatever, you could always reinstall software. You could always reinstall your files that you have. But if you have all your files on your computer and that's the only place you have them, and then your computer gets wiped out, what are you going to do? And if somebody takes control of your computer and you have all your files on there, you got to back up your stuff. And don't wait until something bad happens. They wait till something bad happens and they're like, oh, now I guess I realized I should have backed up my stuff. Just get in the habit of doing it. Even if you do something, you do a research paper or something that's really valuable, you should be like, wow, I should really back up my stuff. From here, at this point, it's the end of the semester. I just did all this work. I'm going to back up my stuff. And just take some time and do it. And make sure you just have your files backed up just in case anything happens. It's not worth the hassle and the stress if you don't have stuff backed up. So that's it. Back up your stuff. That's the most important thing you can do. And that's our presentation on security, which is module 7 in the Cengage book.